across the world, people have lost faith in the dollar due to inflation, right? We just print these paper promises, we exchange them for real goods and services. If that system is going to end, like where does Bitcoin play the role? Because it seems to me like things are actually moving more toward gold right now. Central banks are buying gold. So I know that we're having this action when it comes to stable coins, but where is Bitcoin going to rise in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, like there's maybe a descriptive take and there's a prescriptive take, right? I could maybe do my predictions and I could give my what I would like to have happen. What I would like to have happen is for I'd say the constellation of countries that abide by a certain set of values, right? Like liberal democracy, free market capitalism, commitment to human flourishing, and kind of the strength of civic bonds, right? Like we want to have technology and national policy like support that. So in a certain sense, like the monetary system is like the dark matter of society, right? It intermediates everyone's life decisions. It sets kind of the contours for what's possible for individuals, businesses, and countries. And so these like abstract policy discussions ultimately are what kind of frame everyone's life choices. And I think we're gonna, what I would like to see is some sort of synergy between the existing system, which has its pathologies and has its vulnerabilities, right? So the treasury dollar standard that sort of underpinned U.S. Imperial sort of hegemony in the last 75 years has sort of reached the diminishing point of marginal returns, right? It's now probably creating more harm than benefit for our national power as well as for our everyday individual scope of possibility, increasing wealth inequality, kind of the political pathologies that result, and just the instability of democracies in the West, I think can be traced ultimately to the problems with our money system, right? So if we could adapt our money system, I think it's not like all is lost for the dollar, right? I think it's about shifting the structure of the system so you can preserve the network effects, but mitigate some of the pathologies. And so grafting Bitcoin and a stablecoin kind of emergent technology to the legacy system could be a way for kind of the West to kind of get a renewed lease on life, right? As our sort of authoritarian rivals in Eurasia are pursuing a more like 19th century style monetary system, kind of return to kind of hard power politics, great power kind of, if you can't push back, then you're going to be a tribute.
Conventional power projection,
exactly,
all of that.
Exactly. So kind of a gold based, commodity based, geopolitically anchored hard power system. And I think ultimately that's going to be incompatible with the technological acceleration that we're going through. Like gold failed for a reason, right? Hard to settle. And so it's kind of a stop back, right, that China's been using as a strategic weapon against the legacy dollar standard. And so in my mind, like a clever counter move would be pivoting to digital gold while China anchors on legacy gold. And if we can graft that digital gold emerging system, which is only $2 trillion right now, 10% of gold's market cap, then I think you could actually get one up on China, right? Like another 10x of Bitcoin from here, seems like a lot, but like in Bitcoin's history, 10x is kind of a pretty standard thing. And so we might actually only be a few years away, say it's 5 years away from another 10x or 20x on Bitcoin that gets it to parity with gold. In which case, China's 10, 15-year project of hoarding gold would be sort of rendered a bit moot, right? Because now we've acquired, the dominant percentage of this emerging gold reserve asset. And so it has to kind of monetize through a volatile path along that way. But I think there's an end state here where you could have kind of two competing blocks that are essentially separate spheres. They have their own sort of geopolitical domain. They have their own commodity trade-based domain. They have their own tech stack, right? China has their own AI tech stack that they're trying to export around the world. We're trying to export our vision of a certain tech stack. And so the failure mode would be they just become two authoritarian competing systems. I think ultimately if that's the case, then ours is going to fail. Because we cannot out-authoritarian the Chinese. We cannot, out-totalitarianize the CCP, right? The only way we're going to win is if we embrace kind of the essential, sort of ethos and competitive dynamic that has allowed us to dominate these sort of frontier technologies in the first place. And so that's the risk I see is if I think it ultimately will be self-inflicted. If we kind of lose the mantle of leadership, if we don't, align ourselves to these emerging trends and allow them to kind of reinforce our existing values, then we're going to be in trouble. But I think we have kind of this moment in time right now to make those right choices.
There seems to be so much at stake, and you alluded moments ago to the wealth inequality, just this growing sense of economic resentment. Charlie Kirk, who so many people in my audience really, really admired, he said on a show that he believed the debt was radicalizing young people. do you think that that's true to some extent? And do you worry about the social fabric within our country? Because it seems like we would need a sense of unity in order to achieve the goals that you mentioned, to embrace something like Bitcoin to help us maybe enter a new golden age economically.
Yes, I think it's tragic what happened to Charlie, and I think that observation speaks to observation most people share now, which is that it's harder to climb the ladder of prosperity. The sense if you're a young person saddled with either credit card debt, student loan debt, maybe you can get to a decent paying job in a city where you're paying high rent. You try to date and get married, you try to have kids, and then you realize that just the cost burden associated with that, whether it's childcare, trying to buy your first house, those sort of basic next steps on the rung are just impossible to reach. And when that happens at scale to an entire cohort in a society, you get to a dangerous position, right? You get folks that get angry, get alienated, and then all it takes is a handful of percentage points of that population to get trapped by distorted ideologies, right? They want a culture or a community of belonging where it validates their identity. It gives them some other sort of mission in life they can achieve, when the normal sort of missions that are usually kind of inculcated by society at large, the kind of pro-social paths that we try to lay out for people, if those paths become untenable or seen as like deceptions or manipulations, then you get a counter reaction. You get folks that want to break the system, that want to attack the system violently, and that's a dangerous mode for society to go into. And so, I think it's a cautionary tale right now for our current political order, is just that sense of insecurity by a large set of the population, even as you have this technological acceleration that is painting visions of like a golden age just around the corner, right? So we kind of are sitting in this very kind of contradictory mode, where you both look ahead and you can see visions of civil unrest, of stochastic terrorism, of geopolitical conflict, of an ever kind of declining standard of living, healthcare, insurance costs, unable to afford a home, declining birth rates, right? These are kind of the modes of kind of doomerism that I think have like a hard element of truth to them. And then you have, I think, a techno-optimist strain that also has a kind of some data points pointing in its favor, like the rate of improvement of AI right now. Obviously there's chatbots that people use, but I think they're just around the corner. We could be seeing like real scientific discoveries, like life-changing discoveries in medicine, in fundamental science. That ultimately, right, if you want to move civilization forward, you want to create more abundance, more possibility, more resources for people to do more with their lives with. You need to create like more ways of generating wealth, right? And I think our society is going to face this acute choice in the next 3 to 5 years: is does that potential of these emerging systems, does it get sort of hoarded? Does it get locked up? Does it get kind of directed by a tiny select few? Or does it empower the entire civilization and just transform the possibilities for everyone? And then, in that mind, like that's what shifts minds. That's what sort of shifts societies in a very different direction. Is you get new modes of economic production, new wealth, and then that is a surplus that can be that can raise the entire society. So I kind of have on each shoulder, right? I see both like the sort of the doomer kind of failure modes in our near future, but I also see kind of these trend lines, these accelerating sort of techno-optimist abundance futures. And it's like, all right, we're kind of in this hinge moment where we need to make sure like we're choosing the right path, right? There's that meme of the bus, right? It's like, or the meme of the two different paths. Like this is kind of the path we need to kind of steer towards.
I think what concerns me is that we already are so divided. I mean, there was a recent poll that frankly kind of terrified me, where 56% of some of the respondents said that they think that political violence, murder, in fact, is justified. That's wild to me. I mean, that's getting into just good and evil. And so many people are feeling left behind, disenfranchised. We know that the Treasury, for example, they're going to need a print. Like they're going to need a print. They're going to need to issue more debt. They're going to inflate the dollar, destroy purchasing power. And asset holders always get bailed out. So, I mean, what is the hope? Like the only one I found is Bitcoin, frankly. And I know it's not a be all end all, like solves everything overnight. But when so many people are left behind and the system has crushed them, and they will always print, and so they'll destroy the dollar first before allowing, Great Depression 2.0. What else is the solution?
Well, I think we've been living in a bit of like a hall of mirrors world, right? Where most people's interactions, their political views, their social interactions, their commercial behavior is mediated through algorithms, right? And so it's a pane, it's a screen, it's a pane of glass. And when that's the dominant mode of social interaction, it takes on a sort of an air of unreality, like it's a video game, where your public avatar is just like a character. And you can kind of, change out views like you change out skins in a video game. And it doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem to have real life consequences until it does, right? And so we're sort of seeing this, this kind of snapback, right? So you can kind of live in a fantasy world up until you get hit in the face with either a pandemic, a war, a financial crisis, a political assassination, and all of a sudden everyone wakes up and be like, oh, it's a real world. There are real consequences here. It isn't just a sort of a video game where I can kind of like, talk smack and kind of be an avatar on a screen. And so I think it's good to have folks grounded because you can, get lost in those fantasy worlds. And when all of society gets lost in those fantasy worlds, especially ones that are algorithmically manipulated, well, then are you really a free person, right? Are you just being kind of led by the nose here? And so I think Bitcoin is a good example of a digital system that anchors to reality, right? That it actually has proof of work, that you can't just sort of print imaginary bits on a screen and sort of get people to believe it long enough. And just as we've seen with financial systems, you can have, fictitious capital all of a sudden get woken up by reality, and then all of a sudden it's sort of the roadrunner looking down, right? And then the financial system realizes, oh wait, the things we thought had value actually are worthless, and you get a financial crisis, and we have to print trillions of dollars. So I think like this sort of mode of sort of living in delusion, right? Like ultimately, like you have to get to ground truth. You have to get to real physical constraints. And if you want to move society forward, you have to try to change those physical constraints. So right now, our limited constraints are like our brains and our bodies and what we can use those things to like do things in the world. So planes, trains, automobiles, data centers, fusion reactors, like these are things we have to build to transform what human beings can do and create. And ultimately, like human civilization is about doing more with less, right? Creating more inventions and exploiting what nature allows us to do. Ultimately, it's like creating new physics. Like in my view, what's going to get us out of this is new physics. We're stuck in 20th century physics. We're stuck with the sort of basic modes of energy production and of transportation. And we've been sort of retreated to this world of kind of digital innovation, which has gotten us pretty far. And maybe now kind of the end result of that digital innovation with AI can actually come back into the physical world and actually help us understand, can we make fusion work? Can we radically transform our understanding of what we can kind of create in terms of technology? And if you can do that, then I think you can solve lots of other problems, right? Like if you can cure most diseases, if you can make the cost of energy go almost to zero, if you can unlock the potential of human beings to move around the world, to expand out into space, I think one that has like hard material transformation in terms of our economy, but I also think it has a collective social reorientation towards the future, towards growth and possibility and hope and promise, as opposed to kind of zero sum. Everything is going to crap, and I got to get mine before somebody else does, and that is a negative feedback loop for society. So you need to break those feedback loops. You need to create new potential that unlocks, discovery ultimately that you can transform into technologies. That's my hope, is that we could be close, to unlocking some of those new discoveries, and then if you can anchor those to the collective welfare of society, then I think you can get out of this potentially destabilizing equilibrium, right? That everyone thinks that we're in, thinks it's irretrievable. I don't think it's irretrievable. I think a lesson of Bitcoin is actually that you have to like go to the hard ground truth. Physical constraints are ultimately what you have to build from.